What I found in today's New York Times. It's an editorial by the editorial board, not by one of their opinion writers. And the headline is "A Debate That Can't Be Ignored." They're talking about what happened Tuesday night. And the subhead is "Americans Need to Face the Man Who Is Their President." Oh, my God. Anyway, let me share this one with you, too, and then you can draw comparisons or conclusions or connections between the review of the book, The Death of Democracy, and this particular editorial from the New York Times editorial board. They write, "President Trump's performance on the debate stage was a national disgrace. His refusal to condemn white supremacists or to pledge that he will accept the results of the election betrayed the people who entrusted him with the highest office in the land. Every American has a responsibility to look and listen and take the full measure of the man. Ignorance can no longer be a tenable excuse. Conservatives in pursuit of long-cherished policy goals can no longer avoid the reality that Mr. Trump is vandalizing the principles and integrity of our democracy." It's a tired frame, but consider how Americans would judge a foreign election where the incumbent president scorned the democratic process as a fraud and called on an armed, violent white supremacist group to stand by, to engage with his political rivals. The debate was excruciating to watch for anyone who loves this country because of the mirror it held up to the United States in 2020, which is a nation unmoored from whatever was left of its civil political traditions, awash in conspiratorial disinformation, incapable of agreeing on what is true and what are lies, paralyzed by the horror of a pandemic that has killed hundreds of thousands, and beholden to a political system that does not reflect the majority of the country. The debate featured one politician trying his best to do his job, trying to bring some normalcy to America's battered public square, and one politician who seemed incapable of self-control, petulant, self-centered, rageful. After 5 years of conditioning, the president's ceaseless lies, insults, and abuse were no less breathtaking to behold than they were Tuesday night. Mr. Trump doesn't care if you think he's corrupt, incompetent, and self-centered. He just wants you to think that everyone else is just as bad, and that he's the only one brave enough to tell it to you straight. It is an effort to dull Americans' sense of right and wrong, making them question reality itself and eventually driving them to tune out. Yet there was a new sense of desperation in Mr. Trump's performance. He knows, as most observers do, that he is on track to lose the election. His solution to that predicament is not to reach out to more voters like a normal president would. Instead, he spent the debate as he has spent the past several months, claiming the election will not be legitimate unless he wins. The threat to the democratic process is no less real because it is a threat made in public. At one point, the moderator, Chris Wallace, asked Mr. Trump if he was willing to condemn the white supremacists and right-wing militants who have grown emboldened under his administration. Specifically, a group called the Proud Boys, who have been involved in numerous street fights in the past years. The founder of that organization said, quote, "We will kill you. That's the Proud Boys in a nutshell," end quote. It was the slowest, fattest softball a president could be tossed. Once again, Mr. Trump whiffed. "Proud Boys?" Mr. Trump asked. "Stand back and stand by," before pivoting to accuse left-wing agitators of being the true threat, which is false, according to the FBI. The campaign tried to walk back the so-called stand by comment on Wednesday, but a different message had already been received. One Proud Boy wrote in an online forum, Quote, "This makes me so happy. Well, sir, we're ready." End quote. Chris Wallace later asked both candidates to commit to respect the outcome of the election. The fact that such a promise needed to be extracted in the first place is alarming. More ominous was that only one candidate, Joe Biden, agreed to it. Mr. Trump used the opportunity to warn of a, his words, fraudulent election, falsely claiming that mail-in ballots would be corrupted. Again, despite his own FBI saying there is no evidence of any fraud in mail ballots. Undeterred, Mr. Trump called on his supporters to go into the poll and watch very carefully. In other words, to intimidate voters in areas where Mr. Biden is likely to draw more support. Should all else fail, Mr. Trump said that the election will be decided by the Supreme Court, which will most likely have a full complement of 9 members by Election Day. The court will, quote, "look at the ballots," end quote, Mr. Trump said. It bears repeating that is not the court's job to decide the election. No one handled himself perfectly on Tuesday night, but that acknowledgement is by no means an equivalence. Mr. Biden exhibited remarkable restraint given Mr. Trump's unwillingness to actually debate. As the dust settled, there were calls for Mr. Biden to skip the rest of the debates. That is an understandable reaction because Trump's behavior makes it essentially impossible to have a civil, substantive conversation. But that is the exact opposite of what needs to happen. Mr. Biden will show up for all the remaining debates, and Americans should too. Donald Trump is their president. They need to face him and the reckoning he has brought to the republic. Most of all, they need to vote in person, by mail, however they can, and as soon as they can. Mr. Trump wants Americans to be either too disgusted or too afraid to cast their ballots. Throughout the nation's history, tens of millions of Americans have been made to feel this way. They never gave up the fight for a fairer and freer democracy. Neither should Americans today. The best response to a would-be autocrat like Donald Trump, and the only way to begin to extricate the company from this long nightmare, is to show up and be counted. News editorial board, in my opinion, very closely relating what happened in Germany in the 1930s. And I swear to you, we are so close to it right now, truth seekers. We are so close to a reincarnation of, if not Hitlerism, certainly Nazism, or fascism, or both, or all three. It's there. Hey, Truth Seekers, Mike Malloy here. While you're sheltering in place and practicing safe social behavior, probably catching up on the Malloy cast, remember, we have a new weekly program just for our patron supporters. There are other thank you gifts for your support. Remember, visit MikeMalloy.com and click on the big patron link on the main page. You can't miss it, and we can't do without you.